went about doing their own thing in their administration. Big influence of American tourism and North American tourism as far as Canada, etc. And so the island starts to flourish again. And then you see this big narrative about French and Dutch and how much Dutch is missing, and more of Dutch this and more of Dutch in education and more, because there seems to be a tendency to reclaim the space, even though they've never left, but they're reclaiming it in the name of France and the Netherlands. And that's what we are up against as one SXM. We're trying to remind not just our indigenous people who know this, but our visitors, the newcomers, the ones who are coming with the new Dutch passport and the new French passport, who do not have this history, this connection to the ancestral lineage, right? The people were always one. They're usually coming from places like Suriname, the Netherlands, from the other Caribbean territories where we switched over to English as language of instruction. So they're coming from Jamaica and Guyana. So they're our St. Martiners, but they're the newcomers. And they now tend to affiliate with the Netherlands or France versus St. Martin. But not all of them, but that's the narrative, that you're Dutch. You carry a Dutch passport. You live on the Dutch side and you can't work on the French side. And if you're French, you Guadeloupe is more, endemic rather than, so we're up against that. And so our aim is to remind the St. Martin people and all our visitors that we are first and foremost St. Martin people. We are one people, and that's how we spread the word, right? And so we've had to fight for the correct spelling of our name, for example, in using our language, which is the English language. And to what extent is that different from the territory that is occupied by the Dutch, and how what that means? This is an ongoing conversation, but it's starting to catch on, as you mentioned, through our radio programming, our articles, our social media posts, etc. That at least the awareness is out there that the spellings represent different things. That this is when we are making reference to a specific territory versus when we are referring to the entire island and the entire people. But not everyone accepts it. So it's an ongoing struggle, but we are determined, and we are now hoping that with these new conversations, as you saw with this conversation of slavery and slavery past and Dutch funding, etc., that we do not get left out of that because that narrative is intended to erase this, what we are talking about, right? In the Dutch kingdom, this is what happened, and this is how it maybe we can talk about it as a Dutch family, but we want to move on. And we are in one St. Martin are saying, hold up, we can talk about these things, but our moving on is not in a shared future with the Kingdom of the Netherlands or with the Republic of France. Our shared future is in the Caribbean. And how do we get to become more integrated in the Caribbean family? So that's the work that we're doing. That's how we're pushing the conversation.
And and thank you so much for giving us that eloquent yet sequential and developmental understanding of how that's what is intended and what is being done, and why some of the disingenuous efforts of the respective sovereigns, whether they're in the Netherlands, the US, the UK, or wherever, France, etc., that there is a very clear ideological frame of reference and a very clear form of implementation and organization to make sure that that reparations platform, that reparations framework, and those reparatory justice initiatives are one and the same. And that persons are really clear on, you can't speak for us and then tell us that it's a neo this or a recolonization that or
Mm.
past this or past that, because if it was in the past, then it would have been healed, it would have been resolved, there would have been equitable distribution of the wealth based on there not being an equitable distribution of the wealth from the time that you